You'll find looking at most van walls, there are support rails running the length of the van at the top, the middle, and the bottom as well. G'day guys, Jake here with Journey Van Builds. Framing out the interior of your van can be a difficult step to imagine even for experienced DIYers. Here's everything you need to know to take the raw internal surfaces of your van and turn them into a beautiful blank canvas for a conversion like this one. For the timber that you will use for the strips themselves, I always go for a 9mm thick marine plywood. Quality of the marine ply comes with a few benefits and actually makes it entirely possible. So first of all, a 9mm marine ply is a lot thinner than we would otherwise be able to use with cheaper options of timber. So that means we're encroaching as little as possible into the space of our camper van, which is huge when down the track. You're going to be fighting for every millimeter to fit everything into your conversion. Extra quality of the glue and timber also means that the plywood can handle the gentle curve of your van's walls, whereas a cheaper timber is likely to snap. And of course, it's just going to have a little bit more structural integrity, which gives you confidence as you're fixing your walls and other bits of cabinetry to them in the future. No matter what kind of screws or bolts you're going to use to fix these strips to the wall, I definitely recommend using some kind of Sikaflex or at least a silicone in combination with those things. So looking at the first option, you've got the self-tapping metal screws. So if you're not familiar with these, it's basically just a normal screw which has a really sharp tip, so it's able to penetrate through your timber and it will then make a small hole in the metal surface behind and penetrate and pull through that metal surface as well. The second option for mechanically fixing your strips to the wall is using bolts. Now, the way that you do this is by using a riv nut or a nut riveter. So this is not to be confused with a standard rivet gun, but is essentially the same principle where you drill a hole and then rivet this riv nut in place. And then once you remove the riveter, the rivet is in place and it has a solid 6mm of thread for a bolt to hold onto. Whereas when you drive in a normal self-tapping metal screw, it's got the thickness of the metal which it's able to hold onto. So that's usually 1 to 2mm in your van. This is kind of a niche tool that most people haven't really seen before doing a van conversion, but they can be incredibly useful for just fixing things really securely to any kind of sheet metal or to the structural supports within your van. As far as tools that you'll need for this job, you'll need of course something to cut your marine ply board with, either a circular saw or a jigsaw, a drill with some drill bits, a impact driver to really drive in the self-tapping metal screws, and you'll also need a silicone gun for either the Sikaflex or the silicone that you choose to use. As mentioned, you can use a nut riveter as well if you choose to go down that route. Okay, now we're familiar with all the tools and materials involved in the process, we can jump into actually getting this done. The first step is cutting our timber strips. Now, you'll find that marine ply is usually sold off the shelf at 1220mm, which just luckily happens to be the perfect width for the height and width of most small vans like my Toyota HiAce here, for example. So you start by cutting these 1220mm lengths by 100mm to create your strips. You can do this with 80mm strips if you're quite confident with your impact drilling that you're going to be able to place everything accurately. If not, just go for 100mm to give yourself a little bit more meat to drill into. Now that you've got all your strips cut, it's time to looking at the placement throughout the van. Now, along the length of the wall, I would use at least 5 strips in a standard small van. On the roof, however, because the roof is going to be under a little bit more of a load with the just general weight of the timber itself, I would definitely use at least 6 strips for the length of the ceiling. What's far more important than the position of the strips along the length of the van is the position of the fixings that you have in each of your strips. A full-length timber strip needs at least 3 points of contact and fixing with the van wall. So you'll find looking at most van walls, there will be some obvious choices for this where there are support rails running the length of the van at the top, the middle, and the bottom as well. Now it's time to fix the timber strips to the wall. And I would begin at the bottom where you have your 20mm worth of packers, because that is your consistent sort of space that you're going to be able to work from along the whole of the van. So at that bottom point, make sure first of all that you are using your Sikaflex or silicone, whatever you're using, at all of the points where the metal is going to be in contact with your timber strip. Starting at the bottom, I would use 2 self-tapping metal screws per position where you are fixing. Once you've done your first 2 screws at the bottom, it's just a matter of gently pushing your timber strip with the curve of the wall into the middle mounting position where you will be fixing all of your boards in the middle. Again, making sure you've got your Sikaflex applied and then putting 2 more screws in and then repeating for the top. Because you have done this in a consistent manner, starting from the bottom on top of your packers and working your way up, that means that every single strip should be finishing at the exact same height in the van. If you're using a nut riveter like you see me using here in this video, first you'll need to do a dry run. So sit your strip on the 20mm of packers on the floor, or so that your strip at least reaches the top metal beam in your van. Then push the timber into the position that it will finally rest in against the middle support. Now use a drill bit to drill a pilot hole through the timber and the metal support behind it. So you can use that pilot hole to place your riv nut in the metal support, and it will align perfectly with the pilot hole you have in your timber strip. From there, you just glue your strip, bolt the middle, and screw the top and bottom of your supports. Now, touching quickly on the ceiling, it is for the most part the exact same process. But there are a couple of little differences that I'll run you through now. With the ceiling, I find that it's a bit easier to get a consistent point in the middle of the ceiling rather than working from one side to the other. So I'll mark all of my timber strips at the center point and then have a center point in the van where I'm fixing each of those 2. You'll find that there are already reinforced ribs running across your van at certain positions. There's usually about 6 or 7 of them down the length of the van. So you'll need to use those ribs to fix that center point with 2 self-tapping metal screws or a bolt, whichever you choose to use, and then work your way out either way. You will find each van will be different with the metal supports that are available to use, but they'll pretty much all have a consistent curve across the whole van because that's what the existing internal panels were all attached to. So you will find a consistent line that you'll be able to follow. Finally, I would recommend, instead of just using the 3 points of fixing on the ceiling, I would do 5, just because it is literally holding the weight of your ceiling. So it's better to just have more structural integrity than less. So yeah, that's a relatively simple process that I've somehow managed to make into a very long video, I'm sure. It is probably one of my most frequently asked questions, is how to do this framing. Feel free to ask questions about this or anything else you're interested in with your van conversion. I'm doing my absolute best to help you guys out on this journey. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.